Hi, I'm Matt Hernandez, and this is Book Chat with You. In this and almost every episode, I try to engage with you about, for now, short stories and have a conversation with you about them. Today, we're looking at a short story by Helena Maria Viramontes called The Moths. This is a short story. In this volume, this short story is only 4 pages long. I got it from this short story collection that I'm making my way through brutally slowly. And in this short story, well, I'll give you a bit of a summary first. We get a girl, unnamed. She's 14 years old, and her grandma is in her last dying days. Her father seems to give her a lot of whippings. They say that quite a few times. There's a bit of Spanish in this story, just like the other story I covered. Just slipped my mind by Amy Tan. A bit of Chinese in that one. So in this story, this girl is raised Catholic. Her mom sends her to her grandmother's house. She's happy to be sent there. Her grandmother teaches her how to garden, and she's been doing quite a bit of that. She goes over to her grandmother's house. She takes her slow, sweet time getting there. And then she's there when her grandmother breathes her last breath. Now, I excessively used a highlighter in this story, partially because, well, frankly, the story is probably too short to share any pages on the screen, as I would often do. Not that I have any idea when I might get back to trying to edit this. I mean, I couldn't even get to recording for a while. I'd just been so busy with my classes online. So I feel that this main character is quite a bit immature. I think that it might even defeat part of the purpose that they're trying to make with this story, because it says the girl is 14 years old. I get a sense, and as I try to highlight some parts that I had highlighted here, maybe I can convince you a bit too, to kind of see how this girl seems to be a little bit immature for her age. And then we're left with somewhat of a deep ending, or at least it's supposed to be, I guess, where when her grandmother breathes her last breath, and she defecates her cancerous stomach. I guess this happens to some people, right? Whenever they pass away, they defecate. And she strips herself and her grandmother naked. And I had to read this over and over again, because a part of me, I'm not like believing my own eyes as I read this. I almost imagine I have some kind of reading comprehension problem, because, I mean, when I read this before, a week ago, and didn't have a chance to record, I understood very well, but it's like as I keep reading this and she puts herself and her grandmother into the bath naked, I had to look online to see a little bit of interpretation. I don't want to do that. I think that if I'm to talk about short stories with others, we should be able to read a short story, have this conversation, and be able to get through it together without having to maybe look up other things. It's like if I want to read a short story with you, you read it a couple of times, we find a time and we chat about it. And then if you're too busy and we have a large group, and then we all kind of find our own time to get into it. Okay. Well, I'll cut myself off there so that way I could sort of go through a few things that I highlighted. Here, I was 14 years old when Abuelita requested my help. So, 14 years old, they tell us from the beginning. Not that I was her favorite granddaughter or anything special. Okay? So she's saying she's not anything special. Few siblings there, well, we know she has a few siblings, it states it as much. I wasn't respectful either. I even went as far as to doubt the power of Abuelita's slices. The slices, she said, absorbed my fever. So, I don't really like this, it's just saying I wasn't respectful either. I think sometimes in some cultures, we sort of like beat kids into thinking that they are or aren't respectful based on what type of standard. Respect is that your elders could just beat you into submission as much as they want, and you are being disrespectful if you're saying, hey, please stop beating me, But, and then on the next, inside the same paragraph, it says, Abuelita made a balm out of dried moth wings and Vicks and rubbed my hands. So there's a lot of like familial family ways of dealing with illnesses, right? Soreness on someone, or slices of, kind of missing it, but slices on someone's body of like, vegetable or dried moth wings. And the moths are important, right? This very name of the story. In the early afternoon, Amal would push her hair back, hand me a sweater and shoes, and tell me to go to Mama Luna's. This was a way to avoid another fight and another whipping, I knew. So this girl seems to get whipped a lot. She fights with her sisters a lot. Although we hardly spoke, hardly looked at each other. As we worked over root transplants, I always felt her gray eye on me. I guess her eyes are gray from age, right? Her grandmother's eyes. And she went over there and it was kind of a silent time, but she did the duties that she was supposed to do in the garden. Okay. On the next page, Ama said because Abuelita was dying. So part of this is kind of a duty, right? Then it says later in this paragraph, I never kissed her. There's no quotation marks. So I guess it's that this nameless daughter narrator never kissed. But yeah, on the next page, it says Ama sobbed quietly. I never kissed her. So there's a bit of this lack of affection here, right? So maybe I didn't highlight the best parts to kind of show you, but even from here, there is a bit of this wandering this girl does a little bit. She's not kind of in a rush. The way she sort of fought her siblings and stuff, I don't see her as being super mature. And then in this one paragraph, though, we do see some introspection. And in the middle of it, she says, why am I so selfish? So there is a bit of that. I mean, how mature am I expecting a 14-year-old to be necessarily? And oh my gosh, I should watch all my words because, I don't want to, denigrate anybody or something. And then it says, I heard Ama crying in Abuelita's kitchen. Then it says in the next paragraph, I sat there until she left. So until her mother left her grandmother's house. Now, what about you guys? Do you have one of your relatives living within walking distance of another? Maybe around this time, because the story took place in 1985. But now people probably live inside of these spiraling hellscapes where it takes an hour and a half to get anywhere. But they lived within this kind of walking distance. Then it says on the next paragraph, around the top of 2 paragraphs after, Abuelita had defecated the remains of her cancerous stomach. Then it begins this thing, which I'd almost think my eyes are deceiving me because I can comprehend each sentence, but then I wasn't able to see what it means. She sort of cleanses and washes herself, her grandmother, and it says the scars on her back, which were as thin as the lifelines on the palms of her hand, made me realize how little I really knew of her, of Abuelita. So she's sort of cleaning her, but then this leads to her taking both of them into the bath. Then it says, as it says, then the moths came, small gray ones that came from her soul and out through her mouth, fluttering to light. Dying is lonely, and I wanted to go where the moths were. So there's a bit of this superstition with these moths as well, telling me about the moths that lay within the soul and slowly eat the spirit up. I wanted my Ama. So that's the second time in this paragraph that she wishes that her mom hadn't left me, whatever she did. And it's a bit of an odd scene. And, it is a bit transparent how obvious this would connect to an assignment I just had in one of my classes, to point out a crisis. Because we go from a girl who I believe is a little immature for her age to then jumping all the way to this. It was truly life transforming thing here. And it's a bit much for me to grasp. And I don't want to make judgment. I could have quite a few judgments to say this is a bit much to do. And I did look up a bit of an interpretation of this to say this was a bit of like a Baptist and even a death rites ritual in Catholicism. I'm not Catholic. And a part of myself might be a bit more open to Catholicism now, but though my last name is Hernandez, I did not grow up Catholic. And I know that many people might just have made that assumption for some reason. I don't know, but I am not Catholic. And so I don't know what else to say about this. When I normally might get stories from here, I usually see if I can find a PDF, and I usually see if I can find audio on YouTube. I will do that, but I cannot say that it's already available because I should have looked this up right before this recording. But that's really all that I could say with the story. It is one that will kind of stick with you for a while, and it was compared as a form of realistic or magical realism. I am not sure what to say about all the rest of that. It is a fascinating story, and it might be a coming of age story because if one did this kind of ritualistic thing to get themselves and their same sex grandparent naked in the bath, deceased, and do this kind of thing, it would stick to one after this. And it is a kind of thing to, I don't know, behold might not be the right word, but something to remember for a bit. Well, with that said, I'm going to start getting this ready for podcast and begin to upload it. And I wish that I could speak with a bit more expertise about this, but it is fascinating. And I hope you have a great day. I would love to hear what you have to say about the story. A few more, yeah, I lost myself with it to make questions about and whatnot. So I'll actually just leave it there then. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you later. Bye.